All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is week number 10. I'm coming to you today from the book of Psalms, chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. Again, that's the book of Psalms, chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. And I quote, "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night." Again, this is the book of Psalms, chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. I'll repeat it again. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. Again, this is week number 10. We have several life application notes to get through today. I hope this quick Bible study proves to be a blessing to all who hear it. As our first life application, we want to realize that joining in and tolerating wrongdoing, being indifferent to God's will, is wrong. Okay? The writer of this psalm affirms that those who refuse to listen to people who discredit or ridicule God are in line with how we should be. Our friends can influence us greatly, the people that we associate with, but too often towards doing what is wrong. If we spend time with people who mock God or the things that he considers important, we might join in and become tolerant of those attitudes that are in direct contradiction or indifferent to God's will in accordance with God's laws. And we should consider whether or not the people that we associate and give our time and have a relationships with, whether or not that relationship, that friendship builds up our faith, or whether or not that relationship, that friendship tears it down. Okay? True friends should help, not hinder you or draw you away from God. They should draw you closer to God. Okay? Our second life application note reassures us that we should seek relationships with those who share our values and commitment to the Lord. You can read more about this in the second book of Corinthians, chapter 6, verse 14. God does not want his people to have contact only with fellow believers. In fact, we must have interactions and relationships with unbelievers if we are to tell them the good news about Christ. It's necessary. The emphasis, especially in this verse, is on our closest relationships. Okay, our counselors, our advisors, and our close friends. We should avoid entanglements, right? Entanglements with people who scorn God, and instead seek relationships with those who share our values and our commitment to the Lord. Okay? Our third life application note reminds us to take delight in God's word. Right? According to these verses, the true follower of God is the person who delights in God's law. Not only should this person delight in God's law, but they should also reject those who mock it. Okay? To delight in means to truly enjoy. Looking forward to with an eager anticipation. If you love someone, you delight in being with that person and in reading his or her letters when you're apart, his or her messages when you're apart. And this, in essence, should be our attitude. That should be your attitude. That should be our attitude towards God's laws, towards the Bible. Okay? We should eagerly look forward to reading and meditating on it so that we can hear his message and receive his guidance. Okay? Do you delight? I mean, question yourself. Ask yourself this question: do you delight in God's law? Our fourth life application note reminds us that God's laws protect and guide us. I'll say it again. God's laws protect and guide us. Delighting in laws sounds weird. Okay? Taking delight in laws sounds weird. It sounds strange in a world where laws are seen as restrictive and as punitive. Okay? But God gave us his laws for our protection and for our guidance. Right? God knows us perfectly. He knows us much better than we know ourselves. He has a perfect knowledge of us and what we need. He also loves us and wants the very best for us. So, following God closely and doing what he wants only makes sense. Okay? What does God want for you? Right? Question. Ask yourself, what does God want for you? And obey him. Obey him and trust that what he wants, his laws for us, what he wants for us, is good for us, is for your own good. Okay? Our fifth life application reminds us to meditate on God's word. We can learn about God and how to follow him by meditating on his word. You should read it. Okay? You should listen to it. Right? You should think about it. Okay? Meditating means spending time. I'll say that again. Meditating means spending time. Now, in line with God's word, meditating on God's word, we are talking about spending time with God's word, meditating, okay? Spending time reading the Bible, thinking about what we have read. Don't just read it willy-nilly. No. Think about what you read. Okay, think about what's being read to you. Think about what's being shared with you. It means thinking about how we should change so that we are living as God desires. This should directly affect your decisions. How you make decisions, which decisions you make in line with what. It means meditating on God's word. It means thinking about how we should act so that we are living as God desires. Okay? These are the first steps towards applying God's word to our everyday lives. You want to meditate on it, reflect on it, and act with that knowledge, with that understanding. Okay? If we want to follow God more closely, we must know what he says. We must know God's word. This is how we get closer to God. All right? So ask yourself, what is your plan for reading and studying God's word, reading and studying God's law? How will you meditate it? How will you think on it? How will you spend time with it? How will you spend time with God and God's law and God's word? Our sixth life application now reminds us that we should submit all of our life to God's control. Okay, how can someone meditate on God's word day and night? Comes from the verse. How can someone meditate on God's word day and night? You might ask yourself, okay, well, what about when I'm working, or what about when I'm sleeping, or what about when I'm spending time with different persons and different relationships? Well, we got a lot of stuff to do in a day. We have many responsibilities. You just do, I do, you do. We have many responsibilities that we need to take care of, that we need to handle, that we need to attend to each and every day. This phrase implies that a person's relationship with God should affect all of his or her life, right? Not just one day, week, or a portion of each day. No. In other words, we should be comparing everything we do. We should be comparing everything that we do to God's law. Okay? his principles for living, we should submit, right? We should submit all of our life to his control. Now you can read more about this in the book of Corinthians. Again, I mentioned 2 Corinthians. You can also see this in 1 Corinthians, especially in chapter 10, verse 31 in particular. And you can also read up about it in the first book of Thessalonians in the 5th chapter, right? 17th verse. Okay, so that's our 6 life application notes. So as a quick review, there's a handful of questions you want to ask yourself. What does it mean to be blessed by God? How can a person be blessed? The second review question is, what are some possible wicked or evil advices that you might be tempted to listen to? And how do people mock God? Okay, you'll want to recognize it so you can avoid it. Okay. And the third question is, or it's more of a small exercise, right? Describe a person who delights in God's law. How, and then reflect, how can meditating on God's law help you to resist temptation? Okay. So again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with me, for being with us today for this quick Bible study. Again, we studied from the book of Psalms, that's Psalms chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. And I quote, "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night." All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great, blessed rest of your day, evening, afternoon. Um, thank you for continuing to be a part of these Bible studies. This is week number 10. I look forward to joining you all in week number 11. All right. Thank you very much. God bless. Bye-bye now.